Tamara St. John, who overcame. Today's guest, Aajonus Vonderplanitz, definitely has some ideas about what we should be eating, and it's really an honor to have him on the show. He is the author of The Recipe for Living Without Disease and We Want to Live, and his website is wewanttolive.com, and the 2 is the number 2, so it's wewanttolive.com. And so thank you so much, Aajonus, for joining us today. I appreciate it very much.
Well, hi, Justin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you are in Malibu, is that right?
Yes.
Malibu, California, and recently you've done some traveling to Asia or overseas?
Well, yes, I do. I frequently travel there. I will be traveling to South Africa next week, and then Australia after that. And then I'll return to the state and do a tour here.
Oh, wow. So do you have any strategies for traveling like on planes and not have it deplete you so much the way it normally does?
Yeah, I wear a mini layered cotton organic mask because the benzene is high. Only in Australia, where the pilots and flight attendants union filed suit against the airlines and won about 7 years ago. Oh, wow. So all the planes that fly into Australia have to have a filter system in the air duct so that benzene exhaust does not enter the cabin and the pilot's cubicle. Only in Australia does that occur.
Oh, wow.
So every other plane that you fly in throughout the world is full of benzene.
Oh, my gosh. Wow. So that's a little disconcerting for me because I'm half Australian and I go there quite a bit. So what do you wear, like a mask on that flight? Is that what you do?
Yes. I had a mini layered cotton mask, organic cotton mask made. Plus I take a organic cotton handkerchief and fold that into many folds. So it's about 12 layers thick, and I put that directly over my nose with a mask on top of that.
Oh, my gosh. Wow, and benzene is pretty toxic, isn't it?
Oh, very, yes.
What is benzene, and where does it normally come from?
Well, benzene is part of, is something that they use to use fuel more efficiently. It's an additive, and it's the conversion of oil into a gasoline.
Oh, gosh. I've heard a lot about benzene. I think it's really, really cancer-causing, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, there are other additives. Benzene isn't the only one, and it's not even the most toxic in jet fuel.
Ay. Golly, yeah. And then just the act of being 30,000 feet in the air is a real drain to your system as well.
I don't find that's a problem at all.
Oh, really?
I fly, I'll fly up to, 16 hours at a time. I sleep, when I'm on the plane. Usually when I'm going on a short haul, anywhere from an hour to 5 hours flight, I sleep almost the entire way.
Oh, gosh.
I force myself to stay awake until we're reached, level where I can disconnect the seatbelt because I don't want that metal attracting radiation into my intestines while I'm asleep for the flight.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. You're like my brother. He can sleep on the takeoff and the landing, and I can't sleep at all on planes. It's crazy.
Well, I feel sorry for you.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah, I never have jet lag, even if I'm going, halfway around the world.
It's interesting you said that about the seatbelt because I guess all metal would be an attractor because I've heard of that like with metal coils and springs underneath your bed at night. But I guess the same would be true if you had that metal on your waist during
Correct.
flight.
Right over your solar plexus, not a good thing.
So what happens? The energy gets drawn to that somehow?
Yes, well, metal attracts, it's an antenna. And your body, along with it, even adds more of an absorption. Like if you take a connection and an antenna, and you touch that antenna, you'll get much better reception, almost 2 to 3 times better reception.
Oh, wow.
So if you have that on your stomach and your body, it's a great vehicle for attracting radio waves.
Now, do you do anything like with the grounding technology? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
You mean in my home?
Yeah, you know how they have those products for your house, you know, like the sheets and the things like that?
No, I don't, but I keep, I have a EMF meter, several of them. Mm-hmm. One very expensive from Germany, so I can detect all kinds of radiation waves and radio waves. So I make sure there's no hot spot anywhere in my house.
Yeah, because that's a huge issue these days, especially with laptop computers and iPads and things like that, I'm sure.
Yes, and I use a separate keyboard and separate mouse for my notebook, so I don't have to touch it, because I have an Acer. Acer works the best for me. It's outlasted any other computer, and I've had Sony BIOS, HPs, many kinds of laptops over the last 12 years. And the only one that's lasted me 3 times longer than others are the Acers. So I use an Acer, but like any other laptop, they have a very high electromagnetic field. That is anywhere from 135 up to 200 milligauss. And anything over 3 milligauss alters the molecular structure of animal cells.
Oh, my gosh. You know what I just heard recently? I'm not sure if you caught the headline, but now they're going to be moving to all tablets. I'm not sure if they're laptops or iPads for children's textbooks. Did you hear about that?
They're going to alter what?
Well, they're going to be using iPads and things like that instead of textbooks in schools now.
Well, I haven't heard that, but that would be very expensive. I don't know how they're going to accomplish that one without the government funding it, of course.
And I wonder what the EMF radiation would do to the developing cells of a child. I wonder if that would be more damaging.
Well, it does. The EMF fields, with the radiation combined from Wi-Fi, alters the molecular structure of the DNA, and then the DNA is retarded, does not function, so it'll cause severe brain damage, neurological damage, and physiological damage.
Golly, kids, we're not starting them out right. All right, so I want to talk with you about a little bit about how you got into your diet, because it's so fascinating, and I feel like we got kind of off on a tangent to start the show. My fault. But I wanted to ask you, so you had some real health challenges all growing up, all during your childhood. You had intense health problems, and I think that's where your journey of health really began, right?
Yes, it did. I was born into a pretty violent household. I had a brother who was still in diapers when I was born, so when I arrived home from the hospital, he was very upset by taking mother's attention away from him, in the snap of a finger, or the arrival from the hospital. So right. He was not happy with me, so he pretty much tortured me every day for 15 and a half years of my life. And he used to push me on anything that was rusty. My mother was a nurse, so she was terrified of tetanus, although I don't know if she ever saw a case of tetanus. She used to mention a tetanus experience. Don't know if it was direct with her or someone else told her, where a young man about 12 years old got tetanus and was unable to eat and died. A lot of these things that the medical profession promotes are all from the pharmaceutical propaganda voice. So a lot of these diseases are not really diseases at all. But anyway, I got 3 tetanus shots by the time I was 18 months old, and that caused me to be autistic. So it cut off the part of my brain that relates images to language. Okay. And sound to language. So it was very difficult for me to get through schools. By the time I reached 8 years old, I learned to mimic language like a parrot, but I did it on sound waves. I heard, repeated sounds, which were considered words, but my mind couldn't understand what a word was or a concept was when it came to language. But I parroted, I cheated my way through schools. I always picked the smartest, most sensitive girl in the class to sit next to and copy her hieroglyphs.
Right.
And that's how I got through schools, basically. Except for math, I was an idiot savant there. You give me a math problem, and I just write the answer without having to go through the formula to get it.
Wow.
So I got accused of cheating in math all the time because I would just write the answer and not the formula. But, you know, they tested me in several different ways and found out. So then they thought I was a genius about everything, which, you know, I was not. I was an idiot. So by the time I reached 12 years old, I had developed peritonitis, perforated intestines, misdiagnosis, appendicitis. They gave me shots every couple of hours for almost 5 days and completely poisoned my body even more. I was borderline diabetic at that point. And then when I received my third polio vaccine at 15 and a half, that incited juvenile diabetes and angina pectoris. The angina pectoris was unable to be detected physiologically because the medical profession looks for a physiological derangement, a genetic malformation of the heart or congestive heart failure to cause heart attacks, angina. So I had 300 heart attacks between the age of 15 and a half and 22, and 50 of them made me unconscious. But because I was autistic and I did not really understand all the medical terrorisms that are discharged out there to make you go to a doctor, I wasn't indoctrinated with those. So when I realized when I was in pain, if I just relaxed my body and tried to distance myself from the pain, pain would ease. So that was an automatic thing for me. So when I had a heart attack, I didn't tense up and lock the muscles into, you know, like a Charlie horse, because that's what a heart attack is.
Oh, okay.
The lactic acids and other compounds build up in the muscle, and then they go into a spasm and your heart stops. It's a Charlie horse, very painful.
Oh, okay.
So I had tremendous amount of pain from these, but I knew that I just had to focus on distancing myself from the pain. So I didn't tense. You know, when you tense with the Charlie horse, it gets worse.
Right.
Well, with my heart attacks, I knew not to do that. So I didn't die in any of those occurrences, but they were very painful, and people would see me in school, grab my heart area and, you know, fall on the desk and then fall on the floor sometimes.
Jeez.
So I was taken to the doctor many times and, you know, they didn't find anything. So they told my parents it was all in my head. Now, I'm autistic. I can't even understand language. And they're saying it's in my head, some kind of mental, you know, thought process.
Yeah.
And that's what the doctors run to when they can't come up with another kind of ridiculous answer that seems to make sense. So, you know, with all the vaccines that I had and with all the medications through all these events, I was very fatigued, chronically fatigued, and then pain everywhere in my body, fibromyalgia. By the age of 3 years old, by the time I was 8 years old, I had to do something about it because my parents would come in with belts to get me out of bed in the morning, and that was very painful.
Oh, yeah.
So what I did was I noticed that at 8 years old, I noticed that my parents were drinking coffee and that it gave them a buzz. So I sipped a little of their coffee and it gave me a definite buzz and charge. So I thought that's what I want. So I poured myself a cup of coffee, and both my parents, you know, got very upset.
Yeah.
And basically they freaked. And of course they wouldn't let me. So I would go in at nighttime in the middle of the night, take whatever coffee was left in the pot. They always left anywhere from a half to 3/4 of a cup in the pot, and they pour it out in the morning and then start a new pot. So I poured that into a jar, put a lid on it, put it under my bed. So when I got the first, you know, rise and shine, not with a happy tune though, rise and shine like a military thing. So I pull the coffee out from under the bed and drink it. And then in school, I was constantly sleeping during classes because it was impossible for me to sleep at night. I was always in terror if my brother or father were going to come in and hurt me during the night. And then, of course, the boogeyman under the bed. So I was in terror all the time. So I'd sleep maybe an hour or two at night. And most of the time I just slept through my classes. Well, that got to be a violent process, too. Mm-hmm. Where I'd have to go to detention and other things. So I began smoking at 8 years old. So between classes, I'd go out in the woods on the school grounds and smoke half to a whole cigarette. And that would charge me for another hour or two. So by the time I reached 16 years old, I was drinking 11 cups of coffee a day and smoking 2 packs of non-filtered cigarettes. And then I started drinking as well so I could sleep at night. So by the time I reached 19, I developed an ulcer, a bleeding ulcer. And, of course, Maalox they put me on. And Maalox absorbs all of your hydrochloric acid, so I was unable to digest food. So then I developed cancer right next to the ulcer. And they decided they had to do a vagotomy pyloroplasty, which is a stomach surgery. Mm-hmm. They severed all the vagus nerves to the stomach so I would never again secrete hydrochloric acid, which means they put me in the category of octogenarians who can't digest properly. So that caused a tumorous reaction to the incision. So the entire 6-inch incision on my stomach turned tumorous all the way from my skin to my stomach. It got as high as 3/4 of an inch high and up to 1.5 inch wide tumor. Wow. So they irradiated that. I had 10 weeks of intense radiation therapy. And it should not be called therapy. It should be called treatment because it's certainly not a therapy. Right. Irradiating any part of the body destroys the DNA's ability to reproduce for cellular division. So, of course, you stop all healing in that particular area, and it can move to other areas of the body. So that gave me blood-bone cancers, the radiation therapy. Also cauterized my spine. You know, if you take malleable clay and you fire it at like cone 10, well, that's what radiation therapy is. Cauterized my spine, so it was no longer malleable. It was like, granite. So anytime I had any kind of movement, it would scrape the nerves going between the vertebrae, and I was in excruciating pain. I had a movement quotient of probably 2 inches, and then I was in excruciating pain. It used to take me 5 minutes to sit down.
Oh, my gosh.
Because I had to move so slowly. I mean, slower than turtle speed.
Oh, my gosh.
Then they decided since I developed blood and bone cancer, now they weren't taking responsibility to any of their so-called therapies cause these problems, but it's recorded in science and history of what radiation therapy does, causing blood and bone cancers.
Right.
So then they gave me chemotherapy. That was very short-lived because it basically made me a total invalid. Mm-hmm. I couldn't sit or do anything. I had to lie on a wooden floor with no support, because if I bent my spine at all, curved the spine, I was in excruciating pain. I was lucky to sleep 10 minutes at a time without awaking in excruciating pain. And then I tried to drown myself to get away from the pain. And instead of dying, I don't think anybody drowns in a bathtub. I've tried. It just doesn't work.
Not happening.
Anyway, I fell asleep in the bathtub in a hot bath. I thought the heat would, of course, put me to sleep or make me numbed to dying, drowning. So I had the tub probably about 110 degrees. And I fell asleep for 2 hours. And the first time in almost a year, I had slept for more than 10 minutes.
Wow.
So I was very delighted. So I began living